Hello and welcome to Travel in the Know with me, Philip Saunders. Today we're on the Thames riverbank between Surbiton and Kingston upon Thames, and as you can see the weather is a little bit mixed. This is the first of a series of occasional programmes that I'm going to call Travel Talk, where we have a look at some of the main stories in the news impacting travel. And this week there's no shortage of big stories. First of all, we're going to look at the government's deal with the European Union and what this means in terms of eGates for everyone or continued misery crossing the border into the Schengen area in the European Union. And then we'll also take a look at some comments from Michael O'Leary, the extremely well-known leader of Ryanair, and what he's expecting this summer on the European route network of Ryanair and what that means for your travel. So, with no further ado, let's get started. So let's turn first of all to the big news of the week here in the UK, and that is the new agreement between the European Union and the United Kingdom, which is designed to ease some of the challenges posed by the Brexit deal. And if you're a traveller to and from the Schengen area, definitely the most important element of that is the much vaunted possible use of eGates in the future. Now, this has been much derided by Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservatives, and highly vaunted by Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister. I wonder where the truth is. I have to say, I very much doubt that senior British politicians like Kemi Badenoch know what it's like to queue for hours to enter the European Union, as they are no doubt whisked through the various controls. Well, creating a travel vlog like I do, I certainly know it takes me hours and hours of wasted productivity that in the past wouldn't have been an issue. And if you want a reminder, here's a flashback with a little bit of extra footage from a video I made a few weeks ago about the Pope's funeral in Rome and how I got there and nearly missed my connecting bus at Milan Malpensa because of the passport controls. Let's take a look. The passport queue for non-EU citizens, I was told, would take well over 2 hours. Basically, there were hundreds of Chinese people in front of me. Italians, French and Germans, 1 minute. British, 2 hours. Okay? Now, I don't normally get angry about things, but that is the Brexit dividend, let's be quite clear. And of course, one of the great things that the British government did is make sure that all EU citizens still get the same level of priority that British citizens get when entering the UK. I'm very pro-European, I'll be honest on that, but there has to be reciprocity. It's ridiculous. Nobody was willing to help me, and in the end I literally asked 200 Chinese one by one to let me through. And now it's around about 9:05 and I got a chance of getting this bus. It does make me cross that British are treated like this all the way across the European Union. Is it too much to hope that the Prime Minister heard my plea there in Milan? I expect so, because this has been negotiated for months, and at least on the surface it appears to be really good news for both business people and holidaymakers, and generally it's been welcomed as such. The only challenge is that some of the details are a little bit vague, and I think that it's important to look into that. First of all, there's absolutely no promise that use of eGates across the European Union, which is basically the purpose of this agreement, will be in place in time for summer holidays, which is obviously the period when they're actually most needed. The other element is that actually the devil is in the detail, and hopefully the government has got a grip on this, because opening eGates on its own doesn't really achieve anything. The evidence is my trip to Milan Malpensa. There were about 4 or 5 eGates actually open for British citizens, but unfortunately it was with the rest of the world, and there were around about 25 eGates open to EU citizens. And the reason for this I do actually understand. It's the need to stamp the passport in and out of the Schengen zone. So actually this apparently appears to be somewhat of a voluntary scheme, country by country, airport by airport, as infrastructure is also different evidently across, for example, different sizes of airports. We're talking about Charles de Gaulle, it's enormous, and yet actually Charles de Gaulle immigration is very much based on a small number of gates, so it might actually make it challenging, whereas an airport like, for example, Munich Terminal 2, I think it would be a little bit easier, or Frankfurt Airport. Depends on the airport and its infrastructure. So That's going to be a very important aspect, because if it's only a question of opening 4 or 5 eGates airport by airport, that won't make any difference at all. The whole process needs to change. And I think that this is something we should expect really as well, because the United Kingdom still provides EU citizens with access to all of the eGates that British citizens can use as well. So it really is a matter of reciprocity. So if the government is watching my video, extremely unlikely with my viewing figures, but please check what that aspect actually means. Now, the EU is also supposed to be introducing something called EES, which is basically a service whereby you have to pay a small amount and then you register to be able to enter the EU for a given number of years. And during that process, biometric data is supposed to be taken. And this was supposed to be introduced November 2024. It hasn't been. I believe currently it's expected to be later this year. But this is another important part of the jigsaw puzzle, because will biometrics need to be taken every time you enter the Schengen Agreement area? I suspect that it will be once only, and that then, rather like at Heathrow Airport, the actual eGates will be able to use that biometric information and let you in and out. But again, that's something which is really important for us to know. And I've also, this is an assumption, but I've always assumed that one of the reasons why a stamp is needed as you enter and exit the Schengen area, which supposedly becomes superfluous when this system is introduced, is because it does cover so many states, and that you have to be able to provide quick evidence to the police forces or border agencies of each Schengen member when you're travelling through them as to when, as an outsider, you entered or exited the Schengen area. This is something that Britain is actually reciprocating, because we're in the process of introducing something very similar called the ETA, which is the Electronic Travel Authorisation, and that's required for EU citizens and is intended as well to enhance border control and security. So I suppose fair's fair, you can't expect everything to be removed on that basis. In summary, this sounds like encouraging news for travellers. However, we should just remember that it's going to take time and it's not absolutely guaranteed. I'll just quote the Prime Minister Keir Starmer. He said that the deal clears the way to the use of eGates and there's now no impediment, and he has promised to work to get them as quickly as possible. So, you know, there are a few get out of jail clauses in there, to be honest, but it seems to me much more hopeful outcome than the situation we faced only a few days ago. As long as I can get through the border quickly rather than wait for hours and hours whilst EU citizens are taking minutes to cross international frontiers, I won't be too fussed. Really hope this means solid progress. And now let's turn to the Ryanair story this week. And here we are with Kingston Bridge behind me. Let's turn our attention to Ryanair, although this is probably the wrong place to do it, because we're more or less directly underneath the flight path to and from Heathrow rather than Stansted, which is Ryanair's base, obviously, for London. But Michael O'Leary and all his team definitely deserve massive congratulations, because they've just announced that in the year to March 2025 they have achieved 200.2 million passengers. That is the first time that any airline registered in Europe has achieved over 200 million passengers in 1 year. Now, to be honest, I've worked in a lot of traditional airlines as well as others over the years, and I don't think anyone in any boardroom across Europe would have expected that just a few years ago, and it does show how the model has grown. At the same time, Michael O'Leary gave us some fascinating insight into what he expects to happen over the summer period. And the first element is that he's expecting airfares on Ryanair to rise between 5 and 6% on European destinations. And there are two fundamental reasons for this. One is because capacity in Europe is relatively tight. This is partly because growth has been constrained by delivery of new aircraft, or rather the lack of delivery of new aircraft, although Michael O'Leary has expressed confidence that he's going to receive, I think it's around about 30 Boeing 737s over the coming months. So that's one issue. But another aspect that can't be underestimated is that we're definitely seeing a change in traveller behaviour. Since the election of Donald Trump, for whatever reason, less Europeans and less Brits have been travelling to the United States of America. And that's, I think, particularly odd considering that the currency exchange rate is relatively in our favour for the first time in some time. You know, it's not very long ago, in fact weeks, that the pound was trading at $1.2 to the pound, and today it's around about 1.33. So that's an over 10% increase. That's about 10% increase in your spending power. But where are those people heading? They're heading towards Europe instead. So I think that what we need to understand from what Michael O'Leary has said as well is that if you're planning summer travel and you want to assure the best prices, it's probably best to start booking now. And here we are at the Kingston Riverside Walk, which is full of restaurants and the magnificent setting of Kingston Bridge behind it. Whilst this is a show about travel talk and travel news, I hope that if you're in the London area and don't know Kingston upon Thames, this film might also tempt you to visit. It's definitely worth it. Closing today's travel talk, there's one other aspect of travel to and from the EU which I should just mention at the moment. And it's really about importing foods on a personal basis from the EU into the UK. Now, I love going on day trips to, say, Calais, for example, going to Auchan or Carrefour, the major French supermarkets, and buying delicious cheeses, a little bit of meat products, stuff at Christmas and so on. Well, I'm afraid that at the moment, since early April, that's off the menu because the British government has effectively forbidden all imports of most meat products and all dairy products, and the reason is because of foot and mouth, and there have been outbreaks on the European continent, most notably in Germany in January earlier this year, and as a result this ban has been put in place, and as far as I'm aware it's also at the moment on a long-term basis. Certainly there's been no indication of when the ban might end, so don't make the mistake of going to France and stocking up on produce, sticking it back into your car and hoping you'll get away with it at Dover, because you probably won't, or bringing a souvenir, a meat-based souvenir like a pâté, back on a plane from Brussels or Paris. Just don't risk it. It's not worth the hassle and the bother. It even applies to things like sandwiches with meat and cheese in. I suppose there's no difference in the produce, right? And no difference in the level of risk. So eat your sandwich before you travel. That's my advice. Well, I really hope that you found this edition of Travel in the Know, Travel Talk useful. It's a new format. I'd love to have your feedback, so please make a comment below. And if you're new to the channel, because this is a very different type of content to what I've been making up until now, please join us for travel reviews, restaurant reviews across the whole of Europe and beyond, airline reviews and ferry reviews as well. There's plenty of content, around about 70 films in my library, so please take a look and join us. And we'll see you for another adventure on Travel in the Know in the very near future. This is Philip Saunders saying thank you for watching, and why not visit Kingston upon Thames in the near future. Goodbye.